So people like that, murder for hire, is obviously first-degree murder. Those people need to be executed. Those people are dangerous. I've actually listened to some of these people speak. They actually had a video that I watched, an actual mafia hitman murdered many people. To him, it was just like he was saying, yeah, the toast was done, so I spread some butter on it. That's like how he thinks about this. There was even a certain amount of pride. Oh yeah, once you give me my 10 grand, the guy's dead. Those people need to be executed for a variety of reasons. In 1957, when Charles Starkweather went on a binge and killed 12 people in 10 days, they executed him. That sent the right message. Now, there's a lot of places they don't have the death penalty. The guy sits in jail, watches TV, lifts weights, goes to the library and reads, and we pay for him for 40 years. You wonder what's going on in society. That's what's going on. So you have to realize, by the time somebody gets to level 7, you have a dangerous person. Dangerous. This person is in some fixed identity, and you cannot move him off it. Don't think you can sit this guy down and talk to him about this, and it's going to evanesce. I am the discoverer of hitherto unknown natural phenomena which greatly aid in the understanding of people, from which I constructed a revolutionary practical philosophic system called Septemics and published it in the book Septimics, Hierarchies of Human Phenomena. Today we're going to look at some of the contents of that book, and specifically the scale of aberration. The word aberration comes from the Latin aberrare, which means to wander from. This is a scale of how you wander from your true self to a crazy person with all the intervening stages. Now, I want to hasten to add that I'm not saying that these 7 conditions cannot manifest other than through the sequence, but I am saying that this is the sequence in which they develop sequentially. If you pick up somebody at one of these levels, you can resolve that by working the person back up the scale, and then he'll be his true self again, which is the whole point of counseling or therapy. This is a linear scale, meaning there's no apparent congruence between levels 1 and 7. It is a quantum scale, meaning there's nothing in between these levels. This is not obvious. This took many decades of direct observation to see. You are at a level, and then a billionth of a second later, you're at the adjacent level. Of course, on all the scales, you can only move to an adjacent level. So if you're 2, you can either go to 1 or 3. This happens in a quantum scale instantaneously, from what a human being would think of as instantaneously. Now, when you get down to the level of angstroms or Planck lengths, there is a period of time, because from the viewpoint of infinitesimal physics, the human body is a gigantic thing, trillions of cells. So you're turning the ship. But from anything that a human can perceive, it's instantaneous. Now, this is specific scale, meaning a person could have a different level for a different subject matter. For example, he could go down the scale regarding his relationship with his wife, or he could go down the scale regarding his relationship with his boss, or he could go down the scale regarding his religion. It's context-driven. Now, it is not quite as context-driven as some of the other scales, but it is still a specific scale. When you are working with it, it will seem like a general scale. A guy comes into you and he's overwrought, anxious, depressed, whatever. As you work with him, it looks like a general condition. But as you work with it and he starts to give you feedback, he will give you specifics. He will say, yes, on last Tuesday at 3:13, I had an argument with my wife. That's specific. It is a specific scale as opposed to a general scale. Now, what are we measuring with this scale? You have to remember, I'm an engineer. If I'm going to create a scale, I have to be able to say, what is this a scale of? So if you have a piece of wood that's not marked, it's of little use. But when you mark it out in inches, it becomes a yardstick. Then you can use it to measure your fabric or whatever. So that is the axis. On the right, we have the dotted vertical line. This is an axis of rationality. So above level 1, you have rational. And when I say above level 1, I'm saying a human being cannot be perfectly rational. In the best cases, 99.999%. Pick how many decimal places you want. He can be very rational. And below level 7 is irrational. So a person cannot be infinitely irrational. He can be extremely irrational. Now, in practice, niceties don't play out. You could talk to a person who's at the top of the scale, and he seems perfectly rational. And for all intents and purposes, he is. I'm saying that perfection is unattainable in this universe. So that's why rational is above the scale and irrational is below. More importantly, that's what you're measuring here. When a guy is going through these different behavioral manifestations, these manifestations are telling you how rational or how irrational he is. The person himself, when he's at these lower levels, will not be cognizant of the fact that he's irrational. If he were cognizant of that, he would stop being irrational. You, as the viewer of this, or the therapist or facilitator, have to realize this is about rationality. Not everybody is on this scale. Because it's a specific scale, you're on this scale regarding a certain context. There are other contexts in which you're not on the scale. What does that mean, not on the scale? Everybody necessarily always enters the scale at level 1 and descends. That is the whole point of this scale. You have to understand that. This tells you a tremendous amount about the essence of a human being, the essence of human nature. The transition from being a rational person to an irrational person goes according to these 7 steps. If you have a person who's completely rational, when I say completely, I use that in quotes, completely rational on a subject, he's not on this scale. In other words, the scale of aberration is not in play to this person in this context. Sometimes you talk to somebody and says, don't get me started.
Yeah.
Neil deGrasse Tyson does that sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
He's talking. Again, onto a source subject. Don't get me started. He's telling you that there is some context in which he's somewhat irrational. And once you get him started, he's going down this scale. So you bump into him, and he might be at 5, upset. What we think of as crazy people live on this scale. And what we think of as the most enlightened person does not live much on this scale. But the basic truth about people is that you need to get is most of us are sometimes on this scale and sometimes not on this scale. Now, if you get to somebody like Charles Starkweather, a psychopathic murderer, he murdered 12 people in 10 days in 1957, for which he was executed. Appropriately, he had no remorse at all. If he didn't like you, he shot you. So we're talking about a completely irrational person. He was way down on this scale, probably at 7.
The person at level 7 becomes so convinced by their rationalizations that they assume and then assign an identity or persona that memorializes those irrational beliefs.
Yes.
So that leads to dysfunctional behavior or relationships and so on.
Now, of course, there's plenty of room for dysfunctional behavior in this entire scale. But when you get to the bottom, you're dealing with an insane person. So you show up at the local insane asylum, and there's some guy there who thinks he's Jesus Christ or Abe Lincoln or Queen Victoria or whatever. That person is at level 7. That person has assumed some fictitious identity. And the psychiatrists who work in this institution will tell you, this is not an act. This guy thinks he's Thomas Jefferson.
Looking at level 7, in that person's behavior, there's a denial of their authentic self or an adoption of extreme beliefs. In their thought process, I can see it's holding puritanical, irrational beliefs about oneself or the world. And then in their emotional life, there's a disconnection from their true identity, which can cause internal conflict. So in the workplace, there would be a lack of authenticity, imposter syndrome, or a difficulty in building genuine connections. In relationships, they might have superficial interactions or an identity crisis or challenges in forming deep and meaningful connections.
You said a lot there, and I could parse it if I had it in front of me in about 10 different ways. First of all, let me say all of these levels are problematic, not just 7. It's just a different manifestation. A guy's at a certain level and he's manifesting that level. Then something happens, he goes down instantaneously, and now he's managing the other level. For example, you have a person, he's at 3, secret, he's keeping a secret. In other words, he's restraining himself. I wonder if my parents know I'm smoking, 13-year-old kid. That's 4. He went from having a secret to being suspicious, being worried about whether or not they know. That happens instantaneously. But all of those, as I said, are problematic. All of the things you described can happen at any of these levels. It's just they happen in a different way. It's a completely different flavor. If you go to Baskin Robbins, they have 31 flavors. Those flavors are not like one another. The chocolate does not taste like the strawberry, and the strawberry does not taste like the mint chocolate chip. That's what these 7 levels are. They taste different, but they're all connected, and they progress in this sequence. That is the greatest discovery here. They progress in a specific sequence.
So level 3, as an example, if I was to create a distinction in my mind, it would be avoidance as distinct from transparency. So they're moving from avoiding uncomfortable truths to embracing transparency in their lives.
Yeah, let me just go through the sequence to give you a context. This happens like billions of times every day all over Earth. A person has a misconception. He gets something wrong. Now, why is that significant? How about the misconception that Black people are not as smart as white people, or that all white people are racists? Those are misconceptions. They're not true. In other words, the person misunderstands something.
How do misconceptions differ from simply being ignorant about something?
Okay, ignorant means you don't know, means you're ignoring it. For example, if you ask me, who's the greatest hockey player in the world? I have no idea. No idea. I'm ignorant of that. I don't have a misconception. Whereas if you ask me who holds the record for the most home runs, and I say Babe Ruth, that's a misconception. It's not. It's Barry Bonds. Ignorance is pandemic. There is an infinitude of things that every person is ignorant of. There's some planet going around some sun in another galaxy that I've never seen, I've never heard of. I don't know anything about that. That's ignorance. That's the vast ignorance of the human race. No matter how much you know, your ignorance is still infinite. Or like some ancestor that you had 10 generations ago. Never heard of them, don't know the person's name, don't know they existed. You're ignorant. That's different from a misconception. A misconception is, they give you a perfect example. I was once at a location, and it was a summer day, and I was hot, sweaty, and thirsty. I saw this big jug of clear liquid. I said, oh, drinking water. So I poured out some, and I drank it, and my mouth exploded on fire. It was some kind of alcoholic beverage they had that was perfectly clear. I forget the name of it. I don't even know if it's legal, but it's much, much worse than vodka or anything like that. So I spit it out immediately. But enough of it got into my mouth that I was inebriated. So I obviously had a misconception. Looked like water to me. What do I know? Nobody else was around. If somebody else was there, I would have said, is that water? Can I have some of that water? But nobody was there. And I was under the guns. I had to make a schedule. So I said, oh, take a sip of water. Misconception.
Can you give an example, Jim, of a common misconception that can start someone down this scale?
There's an infinitude of them. It's people who say women can't be trusted. That's a misconception. Some women can be trusted and some can't. That's the truth. How about all men are the same? No two men are the same. Every person is unique. I had somebody I knew who told me many times, all men are beasts. How's that for misconception? Clearly, that's not true. Maybe some men are beasts, but clearly not all of them are beasts. That's a misconception. So there's millions and millions of these. If you talk to anybody for any length of time, you'll find some of these. They'll come out, Jews are cheap. That's what bigotry is. Probably there are some cheap Jews, but there are also cheap Gentiles. Doesn't mean all Jews are cheap. Some Jews are not cheap at all. It's a misconception. And that's how this starts. This is extremely significant because it tells you that people are basically good. Who's the worst person in history? Adolf Hitler? He was clearly living on this scale. And if you were to somehow get him into therapy, of course, psychopaths and sociopaths don't make progress in therapy. But if by some miracle, Archangel Gabriel were to show up and know how to put him into therapy, he would work him back up the scale and he would find all these misconceptions. How about the idea that the Jews were responsible for all of Germany's ills? That's a misconception. There may have been some Jews who were responsible for some of Germany's ills, but clearly that generalization is not true. But he had this misconception. So if you find people who are dopey and you talk to them for 10 minutes, you'll get some of these things. They come right out. Those Trump followers, they're ignoramuses. That's a misconception. Some of them may be, but plenty of them that aren't. That's misconception. Now, when a person has a misconception, the result of that is it makes him a little irrational. So you think somebody going around saying that women can't be trusted is going to be rational about women? Not entirely. Person's going to be a little bit irrational about women just because of the misconception, because this person's perception of reality is colored by a false datum. So he can't be completely rational. He has entered into the pathway toward irrationality. Now, because this guy has a misconception, this will prompt him to commit a misdeed. So let's continue with the Behaviour, right? Since the Jews were responsible for all Germany's selves, we should take their property away from them. The final solution was just going to kill them all. How's that for a misdeed? So a misdeed is a transgression. The guy winds up doing something bad, and he does that thing because he has a misconception. So you have some guy, and he has a misconception that women can't be trusted. So he goes around doing bad things to women all the time because they can't be trusted. So if they can't be trusted, he says, oh yeah, I'll call you if a date, never calls her. That's a misdeed. So that is how we get into the area of committing harmful acts. Harmful acts are typically committed because a person has a misconception. Now, I'm not talking about an accident. If I bump into you and spill some coffee on your shirt, that's not a misdeed. That's just being clumsy. That has nothing to do with a misconception. It's just that I got too close to you and I lost control of my coffee, okay? You could say the transgression, you got coffee on your shirt. Yeah, but I didn't intend to. I had no willingness to do anything harmful to this person. It's just a little accident. If you're two people in cars and you have a little fender bender, it's an accident. A normal, rational person will say, gee, I'm sorry I bumped into you. Here's my insurance information. See, that's not what I mean by misdeed. Misdeed is a transgression. Like you hit the guy over the head with a hammer and knock him out. Now, there's a fine line because sometimes something can be subconsciously motivated. So then, was it a transgression or not? That's something you find out in therapy. The guy said, I just realized that I accidentally spilled my drink on this guy because I was jealous of his girlfriend. The truth comes out in the session. He takes responsibility for the fact that it really was a transgression. He was just too dopey to see it at the time. The important thing is you start with a misconception, and then because of the misconception, you commit a misdeed. Okay, so you're opening Pandora's box. Now, what do you do when you commit a misdeed, typically? You keep it a secret.
What's the difference between an act of commission as distinct from omission?
No difference. It's still a misdeed. So the wife throws the husband out of the house. This is a rainstorm. He's completely soaked. He knocks on the door. He says, please let me in. She ignores him. He gets pneumonia and dies. That's omission. That is a misdeed of omission. She neglected to let him in. So now we were entering into three secrets. When a person commits a misdeed, he keeps it a secret. That's one of the ways you can tell if it's a misdeed. For example, there are men who are openly gay. They don't care if you know they're gay. They say, I'm gay, that's who I am. And you don't have to like it, but you're not going to stop me from doing what I want. Reasonable people, regardless of what they think, don't say anything about it. It's not a secret for this guy. But there are millions of people for whom that is a secret. And that used to be much more of a secret than it was today. It used to be a crime in England. They sent people to jail, convicted people. Those people had to keep it a secret to stay out of prison. Society was saying that is a misdeed. And so therefore the guy has to keep it secret. He has to restrain himself from being truthful. That's where you get into the level of secret. I once had a client, a very nice guy, was working with him for some time. And we were getting into this sequence. We were getting into where he had an assignation with a woman. And his big realization was that his secret was that she was not an attractive woman. That's what he didn't want people to know about. She looked like a model. He wouldn't have cared if they knew or not. But he realized that in the session. That was the secret. And he went with an ugly girl, so to speak. What the secret is, who knows? Because there are people that have different values and such. It's inherently harmful to have a secret because you're restraining yourself. You're not going with the flow. The next step down is you become suspicious. Oh, I wonder if anybody knows about this. I wonder if this guy realized I'm gay. Or you have some guy, he's carrying drugs on his person, right? And as he's going down the street, he sees a cop. He's worried. That's level 4, worry. He's worried they might stop him and frisk him. Can they tell by looking at me that I'm really high? See, that's much worse than the secret itself, because now this is like paranoia. You're going around saying, I wonder if she knows. I wonder if he knows. Like some guy, he goes out, he cheats on his wife. He comes home at 9 o'clock. Instead, she says, where were you? You're late. He says, oh, I had to work, right? That guy is going to be suspicious. Did she ask me that because she knows I'm cheating on her? He's suspicious. He's worried about this now. So you see, now we've gotten this down to a point where the guy is going around worrying about somebody finding out the secret of the misdeed that he did because he had a misconception. The next thing that happens, this is something that almost nobody knows. The next thing that happens is he gets upset. So the wife says, normally he comes home at 7 o'clock. He doesn't show up until 9 o'clock. She says, where were you? See, he says, who made you the police? What do you mean, where was I? Don't tell me where I can go and can't go. See, he gets upset. That is the next step down. He's mad about this now. And I'm sure you have seen times when people got mad at you and you had no idea why. Why is this guy mad at me? I've seen that hundreds and hundreds of times. Person gets mad at me. Why is this guy mad? I'm fine. He had something that he was suspicious about. And something that I did, typically inadvertently, made him worry that I might find out. And so he attacks. He attacks. So that is why people get mysteriously upset.
I have a question. At level 5, in your book, you mention 95% of people who are chronically worried.
Yes.
Can you expand on that?
Sure. I say, having worked with hundreds of clients over a 40-year period, 95% of them have some chronic worry. They wonder, is this guy going to find out I'm smoking? Is this guy going to find out I'm gay? Is this guy going to find out I'm a communist? Is this guy going to find out I have sex with children? This is vast. It's 95% of the people have something like that. It's very rare that you find somebody who doesn't have anything like that. That will be a guy who is very calm, doesn't get upset. You can yell at him, insult him, doesn't get upset because he's not worried that you're going to find out something about him. The way this shows up in young people like children is, hey, the game was supposed to start at 1 o'clock. It's 1:15. Where have you been? And the guy says, you're a lousy player anyway. Where did that come from? He gets upset because maybe this guy was busy robbing a candy store on the way to the game. That is the big thing that you need to know. When somebody mysteriously gets upset, it's because 1, 2, 3, and 4 are in play. This happens in relationships almost continuously. There are very few romantic relationships that do not have this present. People have things that they don't want people to know because they're keeping a secret because they think it's something they shouldn't have done, which is level 2. And they did it because they had a misconception. You have this man and wife, they go to the preacher, love, honor, and obey till death do us part, right? 6 months later, they have a screaming fight. The guy storms out of the house and they get a separation. What happened in there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you can pick this guy up at the point where he has a big fight with his recently married bride. By knowing this scale, ask the right question. You go to the lower level and you get that. And eventually you'll get it back to some misconception.
That goes on all the time with projection and transference because it's a defense mechanism to shift attention away from their guilt or culpability. It's having emotional regulation.
It's like looking at the difference between Jack Kennedy and Joe Biden. Jack Kennedy was really a cool dude. I've watched him speak many times. He would take questions. He had a lightness, a sense of humor. He answered it in a rational way. If you say something to Joe Biden that's not what he would want, he gets mad. He goes right into level 5 because he's walking around with all these suspicions, all these crimes he's committed. He's worried you might find out about it. See, Jack Kennedy was a very clean guy. He was a war hero. He didn't have to commit crimes. He was a multimillionaire. As far as all the beautiful women he was fooling around with on the side, I'm sure his wife, who was not a dopey person, understood it. And she may have been just okay with it because she was the first lady and didn't want to make a mess. And I think that goes on a lot in people like that, whether it's Downing Street or any place else. The wife shuts up or the husband shuts up, depending on who the PM is, because they don't want it to get into the papers. So the person gets upset. Now you have a guy, he's mad. The husband storms out of the house, tells her, go to hell, I'm taking off. It goes to the motel. The next thing that happens is rationalization. When that guy gets to the motel, if you talk to him, the rationalizations will come out. She's a bitch. She's spoiled. He has a justification for what he did. This is how he processes the upsetness. He deals with it by rationalizing. In other words, he tranquilizes his mind by a rationalization. She's really not being honest with me. She's probably cheating on me anyway. She never was a very good wife. You pick your rationalization. There's an infinitude of them. Now, I'll tell you something that I use with success thousands and thousands of times. I get the guy in a session and he divulges to me some misdeed. Could be anything. I stole $10 from petty cash at work, whatever. And after I get it all, when was that? Where was that? I got all the facts, like Joe Friday on Dragnet, just the facts. Then I say, how did you justify that? Now, most of the people will say, I justified it by the fact that I really needed the money. See, that's a justification. Okay, any other way you justified it? I justified it by the fact that I work my ass off in this place and they don't pay me enough. See, and I just keep going until he says, that's it, I don't have any more. Now, once in a while, you'll get a guy who says, I didn't justify it. And then I'll say to him, why did you do it? He said, I did it because I need the money. I said, okay, how else did you justify it? Now he's giving me justifications. And that really helps because it gets the guy to make peace with himself. Say, yeah, I did a bad thing, but there was a reason for it. The justification allows him to be okay with it. In other words, he's not going around saying, oh, I'm a bad person. When he tells you the justification, why did you cheat on your wife? She got fat. She doesn't wear makeup anymore. She's not encouraging to me. These are all justifications. Then he feels better about what he did. That doesn't mean he's necessarily going to do it again. I'm just saying in terms of getting the guilt off, because the guilt doesn't help, right? The guilt is why he's keeping it a secret at level 3, and why he's worried about you finding out at level 4, and why he's getting that at level 5. When you get somebody giving you rationalizations, you know you're looking at 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. This tells you an awful lot about that person. See, the person who doesn't rationalize it, he'll just say, yeah, I did a stupid thing. I wasn't paying attention. He's taking responsibility for it. When you rationalize it, you are ensconcing this behavior in your repertoire. You're making it okay because you rationalized it.
But it also rationalizes you into immobility.
Of course, all of these things put you into immobility. It's just more and more as you go down. And if you have rationalized it, you now have this thing cemented into your mind. The next thing is you form an identity that propounds this belief. I give all kinds of examples in the chapter about this, how this works, specific things. You find some guy and you talk to him and you find out that his identity is a playboy. Yes, he's not keeping this a secret. Oh yeah, I play the field. I get one woman coming in the front door while another one's going out the back door. That's his persona. This is now who he is. Good luck doing anything about that. What you should ask the person is what rationalizations are underneath that. What rationalizations do you have that make you playboy? Women are all the same. So by cementing this cognitive dissonance into his mind by this rationalization, it facilitates his creating this identity, a playboy. So a guy comes into the session and you find out in the session he's a playboy, right? And you say, how do you rationalize this? How do you justify this? And he'll give you all these rationalizations. Then you say to him, before you did this rationalization, was there some big upset that you had? Oh, yeah, I broke up with my wife. See, now you're at level 5. Then you say, did your wife nearly find out something about you? Yeah, she nearly found out that I was going out with the next door neighbor. When you get that, you're touching them now, you're going into level 3. Tell me about these secrets you had from your wife. You get the floodgates opening. Okay, this thing that you did, was this a bad thing? Yeah, because I was married. I promised to love, honor, and obey. I shouldn't have done that. See, you got it back to level 2. And then you say, prior to this, was there some misconception that you may have had? See, and you've worked the guy back up to 1. When you get the misconception, the guy laughs about it. He realizes that all of this trash going on in his life is based on a misconception. Yeah, I got the idea when I was a kid that men could do whatever they want sexually and women couldn't. See, that's a misconception. And when he lets go of that, this whole sequence of stuff goes away. And now you've got him back to being rational. And he can be rational because he doesn't have the misconception that underlies all of this. Now, I'm oversimplifying this for the purpose of the broadcast, but that's how this sequence works.
Even if I look at the identity and the persona, there's so much wrapped up in that, because if somebody assumes an identity or persona, how would that relate to prior rationalizations? And can adopting this identity persona lead to things like multiple personalities?
It does.
There's a real depth to each, but when I look at this scale from a psychotherapeutic perspective, it allows me to delve into or get an optimal grip on self-awareness and emotional healing and transformative growth in therapeutic sessions. If I can gain a deeper understanding of the scale of aberration in terms of its applications in psychology, in psychotherapy, in human development, in personal growth. So I think that there's so much within this. Carl Jung said, I'm thinking of level 7. He says, I'm not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. There's a recognition of the persona or the outward personality that we present to the world becomes disconnected from our true selves and then serves as a defense mechanism. That really ties in so much with the scale, because at level 7, you're embracing authenticity over conformity to irrational identities or societal norms. If you're assuming those false personas and denying your authentic self and adopting extreme beliefs or holding rigid, irrational beliefs about the world, then you disconnect from your true identity, which can cause confusion or internal conflict. And it can cause a lack of meaning in relationships or superficial interactions, because there's an identity crisis or challenges in forming and forging deep connections.
Right.
There is a depth to this scale that
Yes.
far surpasses anything I've ever seen. From a psychotherapeutic lens, this is massive. This is huge.
It is. It's huge. Now, I want to go back to the original word, aberration, right? It means a wandering from. You are wandering from your true self into a false self. So a guy has an identity like, how about a terrorist, right? This guy's a terrorist. He goes around killing people, blowing up school buses. That's his identity. And if you bump into somebody who's at level 7, man, those things are solid. It's like a granite mountain. There's nothing you can do to move that. You cannot gradiently get him off that. In other words, he is embracing this. What you can do is you can get him to level 6, where you get him to look at what are the rationalizations that justify me being in this identity. They will be there. Once you get him to that, then you can get him to what happened before that that got you upset. I was in a car wreck. I broke both my legs, right? That's very upsetting. See?
So you move them to self-reflection as distinct from rationalization.
You move them to the next level up. So you get the guy to look at the upset, what the upset was. And when he looks at the upset, then you can say, what did so-and-so nearly find out about you? See, 95% of people have things they carry around all the time. So you can have chronic incidents, right? So you have a guy, let's say his wife wants him on a diet because he's overweight. And on the way home, he eats an ice cream cone because he wants it, right? So he doesn't want her to know that. He went off his diet. She's going to yell at him. So he keeps it a secret. Then she says, are you ready for dinner? He says, no, I'm not really hungry. Now he's worrying. I wonder if she knows. Maybe there was ice cream on my lapel. Then she says a little something to him like, go wash up. We're going to have dinner. Don't tell me what to do. See, he's upset. So these things follow. Now remember, one of the basic axioms of this subject is you can only move to an adjacent level. If you're at level 3, you can only move to 2 or 4. This is an advantage because it tells you exactly what to do. A mechanic shows up with a toolkit. He has different wrenches, different screwdrivers, different pliers, different vice grips, and he knows how to use these in the right places. That's his job, right? So there's a time when, oh, I don't need a pliers here. I need a screwdriver. See, the amateur might not know that. I'm giving you this toolkit. Now, all of these scales are toolkits, or as I say in the book, it's a conceptual toolkit. So you have this toolkit. You know how to take this thing apart. I'll give you a story. I was at a convention once, and I'm walking down the hall with my briefcase, and some guy ran up to me and said, "Excuse me, would you be willing to work with my wife?" "Okay, I will be happy to talk to her about it. I'll meet you at 2:30. So we get together. I sat down, met a nice lady. "Okay, I'll work with you." So in other words, this was complete strangers to me. It turned out, I found out later, we had a mutual friend. So I worked with this lady, got tremendous benefit, changed her whole life. I'm not even going to go into how much it changed her life. But this friend talked to me and he said to me, "What did you do?" Because he knew about this case, see? And he saw this as a problematic case, and I think he was involved and couldn't get it to work. So I didn't do anything special. I pretty much knew a lot of the same stuff that he knew, but I had this toolkit, see? So as a human development engineer, I understood people the way an aeronautical engineer understands airplanes, the way an automotive engineer understands automobiles, the way a chemical engineer understands chemicals, and so forth. So I just knew what tool to use. It's like before I said, well, the guy finishes telling me something bad, and I said, "How'd you justify that?" That's a tool that I have. Because I asked him that question and I got all that off him. When he leaves the session, he's relieved. I have to say, don't try this at home, kids, because you need to know what you're doing. Nevertheless, the phenomena are there. And even if you're not going to try to change the person, you can still recognize it. I can tell you about many times in my life when people got mad at me and I was scratching my head. Where did that come from? That guy had some kind of a secret and he was worried that I was going to find out about it. It may not have been true at all. I think in most of these cases, I'm an obtuse person. I don't go around thinking, "Gee, I wonder if this guy's a communist or a drug user." I just sort of deal with the person. "Hello, how are you? How was your day? Would you like to have a cup of coffee?" Later, which is something that I get to in meditation. "Oh, I must have been nearly finding out something about this, something I don't know anything about." When this happens, the person has no clue. The guy comes home late. The wife says, "Why are you late?" He has no idea that he was out playing hide the salami with the next door neighbor. She has no clue. Is worried that she might. Then he'd be in a lot of trouble. That's level 4. The next thing that happens, as soon as she goes, he gets upset. So now they're eating dinner, right? He takes seconds. He's on a diet. She says, "Wait a minute. You said you weren't going to take seconds anymore." He says, "Hey, drop dead. Don't tell me what to do. I'm a grown man," right? There we go. We're in level 5. The wife's saying, "What the hell is wrong with him? Why is he doing this?" He storms off to his man cave. He sits there with rationalizations. Who the hell does she think she is? And if this goes on enough, you show up 6 months later, say, "How's the wife?" "What wife? I got rid of her. I'm a bachelor now." That's his identity, a confirmed bachelor. He cheats on Mary Sue with Mary Lou. And while he's cheating with Mary Lou, cheats with Mary Jane. That's his persona now. If you can get him to look at the rationalizations that led him to assuming that identity, and boy, will you get an avalanche. Women are untrustworthy, women are sneaky, women think that people owe them things. You'll get all these rationalizations.
It's a way of them easing guilt or responsibility through self-justification.
Right.
They convince themselves of the validity of their behaviors or the decisions they're making. So they make excuses for their actions, minimize their faults, shift the blame, and move into blame and avoidance as distinct from truth and responsibility. They both live on the same line. It's just which camp do you want to be in?
If you had Adolf Hitler here right now, and believe me, I would love to talk to the guy, obviously through an interpreter, I would say to him, when you had the Allies trapped at Dunkirk, why didn't you send your whole army to surround them and capture them? And he would have a rationalization. He would say, because of this. So why did you think it was necessary to exterminate the whole Jewish race? And he would just tell you about it. See? In other words, he's in this identity. You don't really know how he articulates it in his mind, although sometimes you do. How about Der Fuhrer, right? Maybe that's his identity. But we don't really know necessarily what identity he has in his mind. You could talk to Charles Starkweather, the serial murderer. He showed no remorse at all. If he had said, "I slipped a disc in my mind, I was not in my right mind, and I regret what I did, I'm sorry," maybe they would have just given him life. But he wasn't like that. He said, no, they disrespected me, and so I killed them. See? No remorse. He's in this identity. He's got some identity in his mind, and he's in it. That's why Albert Speer, top-ranking Nazi SS officer, who was tried at Nuremberg with the other 19 defendants, they did not give him the death penalty. He showed remorse. He said, I did bad things. I'm sorry. I regret it now. I was in this circumstance, and really I didn't feel I had much of an alternative, but it doesn't mean it was right. I'm sorry. So they didn't give him the death penalty. They gave him 20 years. So this is ordinary in the judicial system. If you do not show remorse, they're going to throw the book at you. That's what they want to see. They want to see the guy say, yes, I hit my wife. I'm sorry. It was wrong. I'll never do it again. I don't know what came over me. It was a stupid thing to do. He's not sitting in that identity. He's saying, okay, you got me. It was a bad thing, and I apologize. So the judge is liable to say, okay, I'm going to give you a suspended sentence. But when you get one of these hardened criminals who's in this identity, then they're going to throw the book at them. What alarms me is how many people are in this level 7 now, and they don't throw the book at them. I don't know if you know what's going on in the United States, but I had this 22-year-old girl named Laken Riley who was murdered by an illegal alien. That guy had been arrested twice before, and they let him go. Why is this guy walking around on the street? There's another guy who had been sent back to his country 5 times, right? 5 times they had deported him. He just came back to the United States and kept committing crimes. So with people like this, they're saying, yippee, cops are not going to bother me. Or there is some video a couple of years ago, looked like a teenager to me, walked up to a squad car, 2 policemen sitting there parked, pulls out a gun, kills them both, ran away. Whole thing was on video. So that guy was in some identity, see, to do that. So those people who are in these identities who are unrepentant, you got to get rid of those people. See, I think if a person is convicted of 3 violent felonies, he should get the death penalty. We're talking about somebody who goes around shooting people, beating people, killing people. There are people in organized crime, that's their job. Murder Incorporated was a part of organized crime. And literally, if you wanted somebody killed, you called them up, you gave them a photograph, name and address, and they say, okay, that'll be $10,000, and they go kill them. So people like that, murder for hire is obviously first-degree murder. Those people need to be executed. Those people are dangerous. And I've actually listened to some of these people speak. They actually had a video that I watched, an actual mafia hitman murdered many people. I forget exactly how many, 36 or something like that. That's what he did. To him, it was just like he was saying, yeah, the toast was done, so I spread some butter on it and then a little marmalade, and then I ate it. That's like how he thinks about this. There was even a certain amount of pride. Oh, yeah, once you give me my 10 grand, the guy's dead.
I've seen those interviews.
Yeah, those people need to be executed for a variety of reasons. In 1957, when Charles Stark went on a binge and killed 12 people in 10 days, they executed him. That sent the right message. Now, there's a lot of places they don't have the death penalty. The guy sits in jail, watches TV, lifts weights, goes to the library and reads, and we pay for him for 40 years. If you wonder what's going on in society, that's what's going on. So you have to realize, by the time somebody gets to level 7, you have a dangerous person. Dangerous. This person is in some fixed identity, and you cannot move him off it. Don't think you can sit this guy down and talk to him about this, and it's going to evanesce. You cannot unlock level 7 unless you use level 6. You cannot unlock level 6 unless you use level 5. You cannot unlock level 5 unless you use level 4, and so forth. That is the power of this. It's a pathway from sanity to insanity. Now, in this context, instead of saying sanity and insanity, I used rational and irrational. But I also say in my book that the words sane and insane come up a lot. And I use them in the context of they're essentially the same thing as rational and irrational. That's how I define it. If a guy's insane, he's irrational. You're not going to expect to get rationality from this person. So you have some guy in the nut house, he thinks he's Abe Lincoln. He says, I have to go now. I have to get the reports on what the Confederates have done today. He's locked into that. If you could get the rationalizations that led him into that, you could get him to let go of this. But unless you get those rationalizations, and there are many, and some of them are going to be scary rationalizations. I mean, I gave the example of all men are beasts. That's pretty scary to me. that's light years away from any kind of brotherly benevolence. That's somebody who hates men, half the human race. Why do you hate them? Because they're beasts. See, that's the rationalization.
And there's a lot of that around.
Yes, and it goes in both directions too. I often was shocked and abashed at the way men spoke about women. I couldn't believe it. I was often in a context where I was the guy who got along with the girls just fine. And there are other guys who didn't. There are actually men who will not work with a woman. Did you know that? I've run into these people. Oh, my superior is a woman. No thanks. I pass. I'll get another job. She might be a perfectly nice person, but he's got this rationalization in place. See? So there's a corresponding answer to each of these 7 questions. The guy's identity is a woman hater. His rationalization is, I'm simplifying this. His rationalization is, you can't trust women. Upset, yes. My wife upset me because she cheated on me with my next door neighbor. Oh boy, that were you worried she would find out something? Yes, I worried she would find out that I was doing drugs behind her back. Oh, you kept this a secret from me. Yes, I kept it a secret. Was that a bad thing to do? Yeah, it was a bad thing. What did you have in the first place to lead you to do drugs? I thought, it doesn't really matter. See, that's his misconception. I just went right up 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 in that one sentence. But obviously, in a therapeutic situation, it doesn't go that way. It takes weeks or months to work through this, because you have to realize, if you get somebody who's an identity, boy, is he irrational. If you pay attention to Hitler or his henchmen, Goering, Goebbels, Heinrich Himmler, scary dude. Boy, these guys were in an identity. I once accidentally in a nightclub bumped into the godfather of Rockland County. So he was the top ranking mafia person in that county. I didn't know this guy. I was just there and somebody knew him and told me this guy was scary. He was solid as a rock in level 7. I don't know what identity he was in. Maybe he was in an identity of totalitarian king, but I was smart enough to see, whoa, this is not so. I didn't go over. I didn't shake hands. Friends of mine went over and they knew him. I didn't even go. This happens to me all the time. I bump into people and I can see, whoa, this guy's in an identity. I can't talk him out of it. This is as solid as granite. So I'm just going to move along. So you see, this saves you from a lot of trouble when you know this stuff. If you see the type of guy who gets upset easily, which is level 5, this guy has things that he's worried people are going to find out about. Maybe he's molesting little girls. We don't know, but he thinks we might find out. That's why he gets upset easily or frequently. That's how this works.
Thank you so much, Jim. It's been full of insights. For me, I can see how this scale can be so useful. It really is a practical toolkit of understanding as distinct from a rule book of behavior. There are so many aspects and insights I'm seeing in this.
I live in Arizona, but I invite you to my website, which is septemics.com, Septemics, where you can see, if you wish, what many people have said about the book, what many journalists have written about the book, what the reviews are. You can read an essay that explains the whole subject fairly concisely. You can read sections of the book itself. You can listen to an introduction to Septemics, which explains it to new people. And if you do all that, you're going to wind up buying the book because it's an eye-opener and people say, wow, when they find this out, which is what you said about this scale.
It's revolutionary. Really, this is so far reaching. I mean, this afternoon I was putting together an assessment tool based on this scale. I find 95% of people have their story, because people go from perception to story to conclusion in a nanosecond. And they usually present with a ball of string with knots in it without really understanding what tied the knot in the first place. So they're unraveling one knot, but then they find another knot. They really don't know what to do about it, so they remain within that identity. They don't recognize, or they haven't cultivated an environment where they can reflect on the fact that they have subconscious programming running the show.
That's right.
So that's the ball of string with knots in it. As you were saying earlier, yes, you're simplifying this scale, but the implications and the practice of it does take time if people want sustainable transformation. Another thing I see in this is there are metrics for this transformation by using any one of these scales. And then start to measure where that client is at any one time, or whether they've moved up or down that scale.
Mhm.
Because with a lot of programs I see, there are no metrics for transformation. Oh, I had this revelation, and I get that's fine. But when you can actually measure it, then you can say, okay, how can we improve this? How can we elevate this?
What I often tell people is Septemics is human phenomena through the mind of an engineer. I'm a dyed-in-the-wool engineer. I unleashed my engineering prowess onto the human psyche. I was able to analyze all of this into 35 7-level scales that I observed as a result of the work I did. I'll give you a tiny example of how you use this. Let's say I'm going along in a session. This actually happened to me. I was working with a client. We were pretty friendly. This is not somebody I didn't really know. Working with a client. She's introverted, thinking about whatever the material is. And all of a sudden she looks at me and she says, "Are you eating something?" I said, "No." "Did I nearly find out something about you?" And the biofeedback goes, kaboom! Yes. So you see, there was a little bit of an upset, and I knew that there had to be a little suspicion on her part. I don't remember even what it was, but I caught it in a nanosecond, and I asked the exact right question, and the biofeedback confirmed it, and she had an answer. So we took that up, cleared it all away, went back to the regular session, and she was, instead of being critical of me, because "Are you eating something?" in the middle of, that's like a critical remark. So the point is that in a session, the person's, she should be introverted, right? She should be looking at her mind, herself, her memory, her past. If the person is looking at you, that's not a good sign. So then I'm going to want to know, what did I nearly find out about you? Were you worried that I might find out something about you? I actually made up a list like this that I run on certain people who fit this category. And I see what the biofeedback is. And you say, "Are you keeping a secret from me? Did you do something you didn't want me to know about? Was there something I nearly found out about?" Boom! The meter goes kabow on that question. And I take up that question. And you can say, "Those are all asking for the same thing." "Yeah, but this is the one that reacted on the meter." See, that's engineering.
You can't improve what you can't measure.
That's why there's an axis here to tell you the common denominator of all of this is rational and irrational. You want to spend time with an irrational person? Lots of luck. I don't. You can talk to a person and you'll see their irrationality surface. This tells me this person is living on this scale. I want somebody who's not on this scale, because the person who's entirely rational doesn't have misconceptions, misdeeds, and secrets and suspicions and upsets. And I've known some people like that. I know a couple of Catholic priests that were, honest to God, I could just see they were saints. You could almost see the halo around the head. They were like these beautiful, spectacular, godly persons who, like, butter wouldn't melt in their mouth. And I don't mean that facetiously. That's actually who they were. You could see they were just emanating love. They were not on this scale. They were their true selves. The truth is, that's who everybody is. Now, if you get somebody like John Gotti, who died in prison as the head of the Gambino crime family, does he have any cognizance that's who he is? No, because he's living at level 7. If you can work a person up the scale, you get him to let go of whatever it is, be himself. So when I would work with a client, would come in and there would be a cloud over him. He's worried, he's upset, he's irritated, blah, blah. And when he walks out, he's smiling and happy. Now, that doesn't mean that's the whole thing. In other words, it's not the be all and end all, because he comes back the next day and he has another cloud over him. It's a different cloud.
Thank you, Jim. I really appreciate your insights and spending the time in going through the scale of aberration.
Okay, Peter. Thank you.